Listen, before we get into this countdown, I need to tell you something that most Americans don't want to say out loud. You are living through the fastest grocery price explosion in U.S. history, and the government keeps pretending everything is fine. But you feel it. Your bank account feels it. Your dinner table definitely feels it. The USDA just confirmed that food prices have risen 25% in 4 years, while wages crawled up only 12% and savings rates fell to a 15-year low. And here's the part nobody warned you about. 72% of Americans now say groceries are their biggest financial burden, even more than rent, gas, or medical bills. You're not imagining it. The numbers prove it. Eggs are up 43%. Bread is up 28%. Beef is up 61%. Even basic produce, bananas, apples, potatoes, all up double digits. And the craziest stat I've seen? 1 in 3 Americans now buys groceries on credit, meaning we've reached a point where people are literally paying interest on food. In the richest country on earth. So when you open your fridge and wonder why it feels empty, or when your cart at Walmart somehow hits $200 before you even buy meat. This is why. America's grocery prices are completely out of control, and families aren't just struggling. They're hitting rock bottom. All right, let's get into the countdown. 10. The grocery aisle has become America's new luxury store, and nobody planned for it. You know things have gone off the rails in this country when the grocery aisle starts feeling like the luxury section at a Vegas casino gift shop. And I'm not exaggerating. Listen, in 2020, the average household spent about $4,900 a year on groceries, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Today, that same basket of food is costing families nearly $7,000, a 40% surge, with wages barely crawling up 12% in the same window. And people keep asking, why does everything feel so unaffordable? Because, my friend, you're living in a country where a pound of deli turkey is now flirting with $15, and families are arguing in the aisle over whether they really need cheese this week. Stores keep talking about shrinkflation, but what's really shrinking is people's patience. We used to joke about how fast food was getting expensive. Now, the insane part is that sometimes a drive-through meal is cheaper than cooking at home. Think about that. That's not normal. That's not sustainable. That's late stage. Something is very wrong here. And here's the part nobody wants to talk about. Behind the shelves, we've quietly consolidated over 80% of America's grocery supply into just 4 companies. That means they decide what gets stocked, how much it costs, and how much leverage farmers and suppliers get, which lately is none. We're watching small farms close at the fastest rate since the 1980s. We're watching supply chains that were fragile before become disasters every time a drought hits, Kansas, or a war breaks out overseas. Meanwhile, retail CEOs brag on earnings calls about historic margins, which is corporate lingo for, we raised prices because we could. And families feel it. People are skipping entire aisles, produce, snacks, meat. Not because they're dieting, but because they can't afford a cart anymore. Grocery theft is up 22% nationwide, and stores know it. That's why you're seeing eggs in plastic lock cases like we're buying Rolexes. In some cities, toothpaste is locked up, deodorant is locked up, and now chicken breasts are starting to follow. Grocery shopping used to be a mindless errand. Now it's a strategic operation where everyday Americans debate whether to buy brand-name cereal or keep the lights on. And the part that keeps me up at night? We haven't even hit the peak yet, because producers are warning that 2026 contracts will push prices even higher. If you think $7 for a dozen eggs was bad, buckle up. We haven't seen anything yet. 9. The paycheck-to-pantry ratio is completely broken, and the math doesn't work for anyone under 50. Something people really don't understand, and I mean really don't grasp, is how mathematically impossible this situation has become for the average American under 50. I'm going to talk to you straight because nobody in Washington will. Grocery inflation outpaced wage growth by 300% between 2021 and 2024, and even in 2025, it's still rising twice as fast as earnings. Think about what that means. If groceries jump 7% a year while your paycheck climbs 3%, you're not just falling behind, you're sinking. And that's exactly what's happening. 70% of millennials now say groceries are their number one financial stress, beating rent, beating car payments, beating medical debt. And that's wild because millennials used to be the avocado toast generation. Now they're the rice and coupons generation. Meanwhile, Gen Z is entering adulthood during the worst food price environment since the 1970s. Their starter salaries haven't changed, but the starter grocery bill has doubled. That's why you see 23-year-olds meal prepping rice and frozen vegetables like they're contestants on some survival show. And if you think that's dramatic, here's the part that hits hardest. 1 in 3 Americans now uses a credit card to buy groceries. Paying interest on food. In the richest country on earth. And the trap is brutal. When prices rise faster than wages, people don't cut luxury items. They cut meals. Parents skip dinner so their kids can eat. Single adults switch to beans and pasta 5 nights a week. Seniors on fixed income, they're choosing between fresh produce or medication. And inflation isn't hitting every food the same either. Staples used by lower-income families, rice, flour, canned vegetables, are up 30–50% since 2019. Fresh beef is up nearly 60%. Even store-brand items once. The budget-friendly option climbed an average of 28% in the last 2 years because stores know shoppers are switching to them. So now the cheap option isn't even cheap anymore. And let's not forget about rent, the enemy of the grocery budget. When half the country is paying more than 30% of their income on housing, the food budget is the only thing left to squeeze. People ask me all the time, why are Americans eating such unhealthy food? Because unhealthy food is the only thing the math allows. And I wish I was joking when I say this, but researchers found that a McDouble still costs less per calorie than a salad, even today. That's the modern American diet, not based on choice, but on survival economics. And until wages catch up, which they're not projected to do until 2029, the budget squeeze is only going to get uglier from here. 8. The hidden crisis. America's food supply is becoming a monopoly, and we're paying the price for it. Let's get into something almost nobody talks about. And honestly, it blows my mind that this isn't on the front page of every newspaper in America. The food you buy every week is controlled by one of the most concentrated industries in the entire U.S. economy. I'm talking pharmaceutical-level concentration, big tech-level concentration. But worse, because unlike your phone, you actually need this product to live. 4 corporations now control 85% of the beef market. 3 companies dominate 75% of grain trading. 2 companies control over half of all U.S. poultry processing. And guess what happens when the people at the top know you can't shop somewhere else? They raise prices. Not because of shortages, not because of inflation, but because they can. And the data proves it. Economists reported that 53% of grocery inflation since 2021 came from corporate markups, not higher costs. Let me repeat that. More than half of the price increases Americans are suffering through are pure profit-taking. But here's the sinister part. Consolidation doesn't just raise prices. It breaks the entire food chain from the bottom up. Small farmers are closing at rates we haven't seen since the farm crisis of the 1980s. Over 10,000 family farms disappeared last year alone. When farmers have only 1 or 2 buyers for their crops or livestock, those buyers can dictate the price, and farmers have to take it. Meanwhile, the grocery giants at the end of the chain slap on a 30% markup and call it a day. And the worst part is the fragility this creates. If one processing plant goes down and because of contamination, because of a cyber attack, because of a climate event, entire regions lose access to affordable meat or dairy. That's why you see sudden price spikes that seem to come out of nowhere. The entire system is built like a Jenga tower missing half its blocks. And don't even get me started on the role private equity is playing. They've been quietly buying up food, suppliers, packaging plants, even grocery chains themselves. And whenever private equity steps in, 2 things happen. Quality drops and prices skyrocket. It's not a conspiracy. It's the business model. strip costs, raise returns, cash out. Meanwhile, families are left wondering why the same box of crackers shrank 3 times in a year. This is the hidden part of America's grocery crisis. We no longer have a competitive food market. We have price-setting empires that operate with zero accountability. And unless something changes, unless we break up these giants or regulate them the way we regulate utilities, your grocery bill will not just stay high, it will become permanently unaffordable for the bottom half of the country. 7. Food deserts are expanding like wildfire. Even in middle-class America, food deserts aren't just an inner-city issue anymore. They're now swallowing entire suburban regions that used to be comfortably middle class. The USDA just updated its maps this year, and the results were brutal. 38 million Americans now live in areas with limited access to affordable, healthy food, up nearly 12 million from before the pandemic. But here's what's really disturbing. Major grocery chains are pulling out of communities faster than they're opening new stores. Why? Because corporate analysts decided these areas don't meet profit thresholds. Translation: if your neighborhood isn't wealthy enough, you don't deserve a grocery store. And when those stores leave, prices explode overnight. People end up relying on gas stations, dollar stores, and convenience shops for basic groceries, and these places charge insane markups. A gallon of milk at a Dollar General in rural Mississippi? $6.29. Bananas at a convenience store in Nevada? 99 cents each. Not per pound, each. And families already struggling end up paying 30–70% more for food simply because they live in the wrong zip code. But the part that stunned me this year is the death of the affordable supermarket. Remember Aldi being the cheap option? Their prices rose over 25% in the last 24 months. Even Walmart, America's go-to budget lifeline, reported that shoppers are trading down from name brand to store brand and from store brand to nothing. That means people aren't just switching products, they're skipping items altogether. And the impact is cascading. School districts are reporting record demand for free lunch programs, not because parents don't want to feed their kids, but because their grocery budget literally can't stretch another inch. Food banks are at capacity. Some states now have wait lists for emergency grocery assistance. Think about how insane that is. We have wait lists. To eat. And here's the darker shift. Middle-class food deserts are now forming in states like Colorado, Arizona, Illinois, and Florida, places where stores are closing due to rising theft, rising labor costs, and razor-thin margins. So even families making $60K, $70K, $80K a year suddenly find themselves driving 25 minutes just to buy vegetables. People used to say America had an obesity problem because of choices, but now it's about access. It's cheaper and easier to eat processed garbage because the system has made real food a privilege. And if trends continue, which every analyst says they will, by 2027, nearly 1 in 5 American counties will qualify as a food desert. That's not a crisis. That's a collapse. 6. The American dinner table is collapsing, and families are quietly eating less than ever. Before, you know what nobody wants to admit out loud? Families aren't just buying cheaper groceries, they're buying less food altogether. And this is where the grocery crisis becomes something darker, something that feels like we're entering a chapter of American history that future documentaries are going to whisper about. The USDA released a report this year showing that over 44 million Americans experienced food insecurity in 2024, the highest number in modern records, and here's the part they buried in the footnotes. Most of those families do have full-time jobs, so it's not just poverty anymore. It's everyday working Americans skipping meals because the numbers don't add up. Parents are doing what they always do during crises. They're sacrificing their own meals so their kids can eat. In fact, 1 in 5 households with children reported that at least one adult regularly skipped meals to stretch groceries. That's not budgeting. That's desperation. And here's a statistic that genuinely shocked researchers. Sales of ramen, instant noodles, and dollar store canned goods rose 31% nationwide in 2025, the highest spike since the Great Recession. Why does that matter? Because these foods are nutritional black holes. They fill you up but destroy your health long term. That's why hospitals are reporting increased malnutrition in adults under 40, something doctors say they haven't seen at this scale since the early 1960s. But wait until you hear this next part. Americans aren't just eating less, they're eating later. Dinner has shifted dramatically because people are stretching meals into two-day cycles. Breakfast becomes lunch, lunch becomes dinner, and dinner becomes maybe. DoorDash and Uber Eats even reported a drop in delivery orders from working-class zip codes, not because people are cooking more, but because they stopped ordering food entirely. And SNAP benefits? They used to last 3 weeks for the average family. Now they last 9 to 11 days max. Families go 2/3 of the month on fumes. Meanwhile, grocery stores are shrinking package sizes again. Cereal shrinkflation round 2. Cereal boxes now hold 8 ounces less. A family pack of chicken is smaller than a pack from 2018. Ice cream is literally hollowed out with air. Chips bags, half balloons. Americans aren't imagining it. They're being squeezed from every direction. And here's the darkest truth. We are the only developed nation where the number of families skipping meals is rising, even while the economy is growing. That tells you everything. The system isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed, and families are the ones losing the game. 5. The inflation lie. How companies quietly turned your grocery bill into a profit machine. Here's something I want you to really hear. Because once you understand it, everything about America's grocery disaster suddenly makes sense. Inflation didn't do this. Corporations did. For 3 years straight, food companies raised prices far beyond their increased costs, bragging about pricing power on shareholder calls like it was some kind of corporate talent show. And if you think I'm exaggerating, let me hit you with the data. A team of economists found that from 2021 to 2024, over 53% of grocery price increases came from profit expansion alone, not supply chain costs, not wages, not ingredients. Just greed. Think about that. More than half of your inflated grocery bill is just CEOs testing how far they can push before Americans snap. Even the Federal Reserve admitted it. Corporate margins are at a 70-year high. Meanwhile, consumers are at a 70-year low. Lowest confidence, lowest savings, lowest economic optimism in modern tracking. The imbalance is staggering. But here's the trick corporations used. They blamed inflation to raise prices, and then never lowered them when costs went back down. Wheat prices dropped 30%. Egg supply normalized. Shipping costs fell 80% from their pandemic highs. Yet grocery prices still soaring. That's not inflation, that's exploitation. And they didn't just raise prices, they engineered shrinkflation so you wouldn't notice. Cereal went from 19 ounces to 14, chips from 12 ounces to 9. Even Gatorade bottles got redesigned to hold 4 ounces less while looking bigger. One CEO literally said, "Consumers don't check weight labels." That should infuriate you. And here's where it gets even more sickening. Corporations publicly claim shrinkflation helps customers maintain access to affordable products, but behind closed doors, they're telling investors that downsizing boosts profit margins by up to 18%. In other words, we're helping you by giving you less for more money. The audacity is unreal. But the worst part? Companies are preparing for wave 2 inflation, even if it doesn't happen. They're writing into their earnings forecast that they expect to raise prices again in 2026, before any crisis even occurs, before any shortages hit, before any drought or war affects supply, meaning you are being financially conditioned, softened up, for permanent price hikes. This is not the free market. This is not supply and demand. This is price manipulation disguised as economics. And American. Families are footing the bill while being told to budget better. No, families don't need budgeting tips. Corporations need accountability. 4. The Great Grocery Divide. Wealthy Americans eat better than ever. while everyone else is falling apart. Let's talk about something that nobody wants to admit, but everyone can feel when they walk into a Whole Foods. America has officially split into two grocery economies, and the divide is so sharp, so blatant, it's almost dystopian. Wealthier Americans, the top 20%, are spending more on groceries than ever, buying premium organics, designer health foods, imported goods, fresh produce, wild-caught fish, and $9 kombucha without blinking. Meanwhile, the bottom 80%, they're buying less food, worse food, and more ultra-processed food than at any point in U.S. history. And the reason is brutally simple. Healthy food inflation is nearly double the inflation of processed foods. Fresh fruit is up 27% since 2019. Fresh vegetables, up 32%. Lean meats, up 41%. Organic produce, practically a luxury item. But processed food, the stuff that wrecks your health, rose only about 11%. Not because it's cheap to make, but because food giants want you hooked. Junk food has the highest profit margins in the grocery sector, and unhealthy Americans are profitable Americans. That's why the biggest grocery stores quietly expanded freezer aisles and shrank fresh produce sections. It's not an accident. It's economics. And here's the part that makes this whole situation feel like a social experiment gone wrong. Your zip code now predicts your diet with terrifying accuracy. Live in a higher income suburb? You get Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, Sprouts, farmers markets, fresh produce rows stretching to the horizon. Live in a working class neighborhood. You get Dollar General, Family Dollar, convenience stores, and fast food on every corner. Whole Foods opened 54 new locations in affluent zip codes last year, while 70% of grocery store closures happened in neighborhoods making under $50K a year. That's not supply and demand, that's corporate redlining. Even hospitals have noticed the shift. Diabetes is rising fastest among Americans under 35. Heart disease is increasing in people who should still be in peak health. And dietitians say the cause is clear: poor quality food at unaffordable prices. Meanwhile, luxury grocery stores are thriving. People with money are eating fresher, cleaner, healthier diets than any generation before them. And everyone else? They're eating whatever fills the stomach without destroying the bank account. We have created a nation where nutrition depends entirely on income, and that means health now depends entirely on income. America promised equal opportunity, but somehow we've ended up with equal calories only if you can afford them. And that might be the most disturbing sign yet that our society is fracturing. 3. The new American survival economy. Families are turning to extreme measures just to keep food on the table. Here's a truth almost no politician will acknowledge, but every working American already knows deep in their bones. We are quietly entering a survival economy. And if that phrase sounds dramatic, just wait until you hear what families are doing right now. Because this is no longer normal belt tightening. This is survival mode budgeting like something out of the 1930s. The Federal Reserve's latest report showed that 61% of Americans are now living paycheck to paycheck, but here's the part they didn't blast across the headlines. Within that group, nearly 40% say they could not afford groceries for even 1 week if their paycheck was delayed. That means millions of families are one missed shift away from empty refrigerators. And what do people do when they're pushed to that edge? They improvise. They downsize everything, they ration meals, they buy in bulk with friends because they can't afford memberships alone. They switch to discount stores, clearance items, dented can aisles, and expired date bins. Some families literally divide their grocery list into categories like need to survive versus need to function. Even middle-income households are doing something economists call food cycling. Eating well for a week after payday, then living on noodles and pantry scraps until the next one. And here's where it gets really alarming. Home gardening has surged 147% since 2020, not because people suddenly got into hobbies, but because they're running out of options. Backyard chickens? Up 300% in suburban counties. Food pantries? Reporting the highest demand in U.S. history, higher than during COVID. These aren't unemployed families lining up. These are nurses, teachers, airport employees, delivery drivers, retail managers, the backbone of America, standing in line for a box of groceries because their salaries can't outpace the price of eggs. And let's talk about the new underground economy forming around groceries. Apps for discounted ugly produce are exploding. People are trading food items on Facebook Marketplace like it's the new Craigslist. One study found that 22% of Americans now engage in some form of grocery barter, trading diapers for canned goods, flour for rice, produce for frozen meat. That is not what a stable economy looks like. That is what fragile systems look like before they break. And unless something changes, unless wages rise or prices fall, the survival economy isn't a temporary phase. It's the next chapter of American life. 2. The grocery crisis is now a health crisis, and America is paying the price in real time. Let's talk about the part of this grocery disaster that hits the hardest, because this isn't just about money anymore. It's about health, and the consequences are unfolding faster than anyone expected. Doctors are sounding the alarm. Americans are becoming sicker at a younger age than any generation before them, and they're pointing directly at skyrocketing grocery prices as the reason. Think about this. When fresh produce costs more than fast food, when lean meats are priced like luxury cuts, when a bag of spinach costs more than a frozen pizza, people don't choose the unhealthy option. They're forced into it. And now we're seeing the fallout. Type 2 diabetes is rising fastest among Americans under 30. Childhood obesity just hit a record high. Hypertension is showing up in teenagers who, a decade ago, would have been considered perfectly healthy. Emergency rooms are reporting nutrient deficiency cases among adults. Adults, something medical staff say hasn't been common since the 1960s. But guess which foods haven't gone up in price? Ultra-processed foods, the stuff designed in labs to create addiction. Chips, sugary cereals, boxed meals, frozen snacks, these have risen only about 11% compared to produce jumping 30-40%. Why? Because it's profitable. And because corporations know that when families are broke, they will always opt for the highest calorie, lowest cost option. Even the FDA quietly released a report this year showing that families in the bottom 40% income bracket now consume 68% of their total calories from processed food, the highest percentage ever recorded in the United States. And here's the disturbing twist. Food quality has declined even as prices rise. We're seeing more filler ingredients, less real nutrients, more preservatives, more additives. It's a double hit. You're paying more for food that does less for your body. Meanwhile, wealthy Americans, the top 10%, are actually getting healthier because they can afford clean foods, supplements, premium meats, and organic produce. So now health is becoming a class divide. Grocery affordability is becoming a predictor of lifespan. In fact, a new Johns Hopkins projection says that if current trends continue, the life expectancy gap between wealthy and poor Americans will exceed 20 years by 2040, the largest gap since the 1800s. That is catastrophic. And it's happening not because of genetics, not because of personal choices, but because of food access. Because healthy eating has become a luxury good. 1. America is heading toward a full-scale food breakdown, and the warning signs are already flashing. Here's the part nobody wants to hear, but everyone needs to hear, because once you understand this, the whole grocery crisis suddenly snaps into focus. We are drifting toward a full-scale food affordability collapse unless something changes. And I'm not talking about empty shelves or apocalyptic scenarios. I'm talking about the slow, grinding breakdown where everyday life gets harder and harder until one day families hit a wall they cannot climb. The USDA's forward projections, the ones they don't headline because they're too bleak, predict that food prices will rise another 20-30% by 2027, even under normal conditions. That estimate doesn't include droughts, global conflicts, input shortages, diesel spikes, supply chain disruptions, or climate shocks, all of which analysts say are now yearly events. Meanwhile, wages expected to grow maybe 3% annually at best. You don't need a finance degree to see where this ends. If food rises 20% and wages rise 9% in that same period, the bottom half of the country gets priced out of stable nutrition entirely. And we're already seeing the early signs. SNAP recipients have surged past pre-pandemic levels. Middle-income families, not low-income, are the fastest-growing group using food banks. Grocery debt, yes, that's a real thing now, is rising on credit cards. Households that once budgeted $400 a month now spend $700. Small grocery stores are closing. Big chains are locking up basic essentials. Even Costco, the last stronghold of bulk affordability, warned investors that upward price pressure remains unavoidable. That is corporate code for get ready. And here's the most chilling data point. 29% of Americans say they fear they won't be able to afford food within the next year. Not rent, not medical bills, food. That is the psychological breaking point of a society. When basic survival becomes uncertain, everything else, political stability, mental health, family life, social cohesion, starts unraveling. And if we continue on this track, grocery inflation will become the defining crisis of this generation, the thing historians look back on as the real turning point. Families can only stretch their budgets so far before something snaps. And right now, you can feel that snap coming.